When running a professional auto racing league, sponsorship is like water. NASCAR needs it to sustain itself as an organization to where they can put on a great product, in the process making them much more appealing to even more sponsors than the sports leagues that they're competing against, like the NFL, NBA, and motorsports examples like IndyCar and Formula One. The money that corporate America possesses is a necessity, which makes NASCAR's lawsuit in 2007 especially eerie. NRF Productions presents NASCAR's ugly lawsuit with AT&T Incorporated. June 18th, 2003, NASCAR officially went cold turkey on its dependence of Winston to fund the NASCAR Cup Series. The Nextel company was in awe. They were stunned by the new mainstream feel of the sports league. Their new deal included the development of a sweeping new device that would change the way that NASCAR fans can access information from the race and the drivers. This cellular device would be used at its Cup Series races. This would be accompanied by the exclusive rights as a telecom provider at these NASCAR Cup Series events. However, alarms would go off during the negotiations, and guys, I am not talking about the one guy in the boardroom on that day that didn't have his phone on silent. NASCAR felt a little uneasy about Nextel's aggressive push to forbid sponsorship participation of its competitors. At the time, Cingular Wireless was the primary sponsor of RCR and Robbie Gordon. As for Alltel, they had a similar deal, only this time it was with Penske Racing and Ryan Newman. The agreement between NASCAR and Nextel forbid rivaling providers from sponsoring and participating in the NASCAR Cup Series. That part of the agreement explicitly name-dropped Sprint, Verizon, Alltel, Cingular, and AT&T. Cingular disagreed with the monopoly on NASCAR Nextel was attempting to put in place, emphasizing that a Cingular car still had a place on the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series grid. Nextel would ultimately compromise with NASCAR. A grandfather clause was added to the agreement that permitted telecom companies that had contracts predating the Nextel Cup Series to continue. However, if Alltel or Cingular wished to expand their sponsorship deals through more races or by moving to another team, the grandfather clause was strictly against this. Allegedly, the branding on the car could also not be transferred via a name change or a merger. Still, you had telecom companies like Cingular that continued to compete and win in a competitive telecom climate. However, the one thing to note about the 2000s is that the telecom wars, they were tight and cutthroat due to technology advancing. The new phones that were coming out were smarter, more technologically advanced, and to do that, some companies started to think about merging their resources to try to gain an edge on the landlines they had. Cingular was no exception. In 2004, SBC Communications Incorporated, the majority owners of Cingular, acquired AT&T Wireless, who actually wanted to expand their involvement with BAM Racing at the time, but could not because of the Nextel deal. 1 year later, the SBC acquired the AT&T Corporation as a whole to officially rebrand to AT&T Incorporated. To come full circle in all of this, federal regulators approved AT&T Incorporated's acquisition of the Bell South Corp, the co-creator of Cingular Wireless, for $86 billion. Now, with a third of the nation's landlines and the other 40% of Cingular Wireless, AT&T Incorporated now had itself a huge identity crisis. Cingular had a loyal set of users, but the AT&T brand had a larger sphere of influence internationally. The consensus in the boardroom was that Cingular needed to be phased out completely. The AT&T Globe would be their universal branding on ads, promotional materials, trucks, bills, and even race cars. This change wouldn't be met favorably by all. Allegedly, NASCAR submitted a letter to RCR in April of 2005 that Singular would not be permitted to change its name and branding on the 31, now driven by one of the most popular drivers in the entire series, Jeff Burton. In 2007, Richard Childress Racing was basically that girl that went to get her hair cut for $100 just to look the exact same. Everything about Jeff Burton's new design was the exact same as the primary design, except in the place of the singular jack was an AT&T globe. One would hardly notice such a change, but for NASCAR executives, they were triggered. They were mad. Because of NASCAR's existing sponsorship deal with Nextel, the paint scheme was rejected. AT&T officially looked to clear up this dispute by turning to the U.S. District Court in Atlanta, suing NASCAR on the premise that it was not a third-party sponsorship. The documents filed stated that the refusal to run the AT&T branding confused race fans, which, according to AT&T, was half of all its customers. Their company initiative to establish themselves as a loyal NASCAR sponsor was irrelevant if they continued using the singular logo. The company was now known as AT&T, and race fans should be able to see that on the racetrack. The courts agreed with this. They agreed with AT&T's assessment. AT&T Incorporated was officially given a preliminary injunction to put its logo on the race car in place of the singular jack, meaning Nextel executives could only punch air from the press box as the AT&T car made its debut in the Nextel-sponsored 2007 All-Star race. AT&T was declared the winner and celebrated by extending their partnership with Richard Childress Racing through the 2010 season. So if you enjoyed this video, let me direct your attention to wait a minute, hold up folks, do not go anywhere, because this deal with NASCAR and AT&T is about to get a lot ugly. So just weeks later, NASCAR filed a countersuit in response to AT&T's entrance into the NASCAR circuit. Now that NASCAR fans could distinguish Singular now as AT&T through the branding on Jeff Burton's race car. They claimed it created $100 million worth of damage to NASCAR's exclusive agreement with Nextel. Only this time around, NASCAR wouldn't just defend their entitlement sponsor, but they would double down. NASCAR sought to eliminate all non-Nextel telecom companies from the series entirely, beginning with the 2008 season. And as for round 2, the courts would officially raise the hand of Brian France as the winner of round 2. The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals determined that NASCAR could prevent AT&T from using its logos on Burton's number 31 RCR Chevrolet Impala, claiming further that the San Antonio-based AT&T lacked the standing to challenge NASCAR's decision. NASCAR now had the legal wand to zap any paint scheme out of existence featuring the AT&T logo. Fans featuring a diverse range of ages and ethnicities lined the streets for the hauler parade to see an eerie-looking Richard Childress Racing hauler make its way to the Bristol Motor Speedway. As a sold-out crowd on Saturday night of 160,000 people did a card trick on race day to promote Nextel's sponsorship of the series, Jeff Burton would officially take to the freshly paved concrete in an unsponsored car, which ESPN addressed on the broadcast.
We want to mention the 31 car does not have sponsor logos on it because this past week the U.S. 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the injunction that had been placed that had allowed the AT&T logo on the car. And that now being overturned means that that logo has to disappear from the car. It was not grandfathered in. NASCAR has approved the paint schemes that they were bringing to the racetrack, and so Richard Childress Racing opted to bring this scheme with no logos on it to the racetrack here tonight.
However, AT&T wasn't sidelined completely from NASCAR that night. Nextel's exclusivity did not equate to NASCAR's television providers, meaning AT&T could still legally sponsor Jeff Burton, just not on the car at the racetrack. So for Bristol Night Race Weekend, we had your traditional verbal spats. However, it wouldn't be between those in helmets and fire suits, but rather those in suits and ties. AT&T's Mark Siegel had to rationalize to NASCAR fans that going up against the sports league that they dearly loved was necessary. To Too Long Didn't Read It, the reason they were doing this was because they loved the sports league and its fans. On the other side of the coin, you had Ramsey Poston representing NASCAR. How do you, from that, convince NASCAR fans that banning a sponsor is a greater good for the Motorsports League? Poston would straight up claim that AT&T was being dishonest, even citing evidence of 2 stores near the Bristol Motor Speedway that featured the singular branding. If AT&T Incorporated thought that the singular logo was good enough for its stores, then it should be good enough to market at 200 miles per hour. Poston also emphasized that Nextel's exclusive rights supported all of its drivers through the prize money and the promotion of the series. But how do you rationalize this to Jeff Burton fans? Just a few years ago, Jeff Burton lost a new primary sponsor and eventually his ride at Roush because NASCAR had yet to allow liquor sponsorships. This ongoing battle right here nauseated made NASCAR fans a little dizzy. Because let's be honest, when you attend a race, you buy a ticket to see which of the 43 drivers wins the race. One of the last things you pay to do is to count how many more Nextel cars or billboards there are compared to AT&T. The only people that are doing this are the people in the Nextel suites sitting there, wow, we have so much exposure, we're getting our bang for our buck. And keep this in mind, Nextel was already crushing AT&T. In their NASCAR advertisements, Nextel had the likes of Dale Earnhardt Jr., Tony Stewart, Jimmy Johnson, and Kasey Kahne promote their products. What difference does it make if Jeff Burton does promotions with an AT&T phone in his hand instead of a Nextel phone? Wait, did I say Nextel? You could argue that Nextel was being a bit hypocritical because for 2008, they would switch their branding to Sprint. And in this case, it wasn't an existing company changing its name because it had acquired another brand. This right here was Sprint acquiring Nextel. For many NASCAR fans, it just did not seem fair that Nextel could dictate which telecom companies had and didn't have the rights to advertise in NASCAR. As for NASCAR itself, they were going through with this lawsuit to completely kick out a company investing at least $16 million into their product. As Richard Childress stated, if AT&T lost, they were leaving NASCAR completely. They had no reason to continue sponsoring NASCAR if they weren't even able to sponsor a driver or a team. As a result, Mr. Childress cited that this was as big of a loss for this form of auto racing just as much as it would be a loss for his 31 team. September 7th, 2007, the cellular controversy that annoyed NASCAR fans as badly as someone yelling at you with a 30-watt microphone, it was finally over. NASCAR had the full power to finish the job. However, it realized it was at odds with its own drivers, teams, and fan base. Because of that, NASCAR and Nextel officially settled with AT&T. The AT&T Globe was officially reinstated on Jeff Burton's Impala after taking a 2-week vacation. In return, AT&T agreed to leave NASCAR after the 2008 season. Both sides felt that this was the best move for both parties. AT&T would be able to advertise in NASCAR. Beginning with the 2009 season, Sprint would be the exclusive telecom provider. Plus, it's a win for Richard Childress Racing, who would now have a year and a half to find a replacement sponsor for AT&T. Ultimately, Tim McGee, who was the head of the AT&T Sports Marketing Department, he was overjoyed to see the AT&T Globe in victory lane for 2 races that season. However, he would be disheartened after Homestead to know that the AT&T car would be parked in the garage. However, this wasn't without a last-minute plea to try to keep AT&T in the sports league. Richard Childress tried his best to lobby NASCAR into letting AT&T stay past 2008, which reportedly there were no exit clauses in the new 3-year deal between AT&T and Richard Childress Racing. However, NASCAR considered this a done deal. RCR would ultimately follow through with finding a new sponsor for 2009, which would be Caterpillar. It was a process that would indeed be aided by AT&T. And interestingly enough, AT&T won in the long run. In the last quarter of 2007, AT&T picked up a record 2.7 million new customers. Today, AT&T is the largest telecom company in the entire world. That same quarter where AT&T had record gains, Sprint lost 109,000 customers. They would ultimately drop their exclusive sponsorship of NASCAR's Cup Series after 2016, and recently they were acquired by T-Mobile. Some NASCAR fans out there might see the lack of telecom providers in today's NASCAR as a liability for the sports league. After all, in today's NASCAR, there's really only a few Verizon billboards here and a few T-Mobile commercials on the broadcast there.
What a pain in the hey neighbor!
For others that especially remember the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series era, they'd like to not repeat history seeing NASCAR actively sue one of its most devoted sponsors. If you enjoyed this video, keep this rabbit hole going. Go watch some more full tank NASCAR content that this channel has to offer. Other than that, this is Nathan for NRF Productions. Life's a beach, and then you drive.